first want to talk about what sort of inspired you for the series.
Well, the inspiration for the series came from the fact that I was seeing my son about to graduate from college and head out into the workforce. And I just thought, when I was his age, I was really a big fan of movies of Cameron Crowe, like Singles and Say Anything. And I thought, I'd like to do something about, based on him and his friends and inspired by them, and that had that sort of positivity that I had seen in the Cameron Crowe stuff growing up. And so I put those two things together and made the show.
And what did your son think when you said, all right, we're going to write about...
Well, I had to get his permission to do it, but beyond that, he sort of stays out of it. I mean, he's an architect. He's in grad school right now. And he's like an environmental activist, and so TV isn't really on his mind.
And do you get any inspiration at all from him, or is he totally separate
At this point, I get most of my inspiration from the writer's room, where we have a staff of young writers who write the show.
Great. And can you talk about casting for the show? Did you know right away that you wanted some fresh faces to present this new show to the audiences?
Yeah, well, I knew when I went out looking for the cast that I would need to find really special people, because they need to be able to play the drama, they need to be able to play the comedy, and they need to be able to play the sort of sincerity and open-heartedness that the show requires, because it's a very sort of positive show, and you can't really fake that. Or you can, but it's not very good. So it took a little while in some cases to find the right people, but I'm really excited about the folks we found. They feel like family to me, and I'm just very lucky to work with all of them.
And you talked about that there was comedy and drama, so that was going to be one of my questions. What sort of is the tone of the show?
I think the tone of the show is a little of everything. It's very, very funny. It's also very, very sweet, and very, very emotional. These characters face real struggles, whether it's like coming out to your parents, or dealing with a workplace romance that's gone wrong and is creating problems. I think the tone is like the tone of life. At the end of the day, I'd say the tone really is affirmative, because what the show is really trying to say is that even in tough times, when it's hard to find work, it's hard to find to get money, it's hard to even just manage to move out of the house sometimes, that money is not what life is all about. That it's about love, it's about friendship, and those are the things to keep our eyes on at the end of the day.
And so with that in mind, I feel like each of the characters, they each have a very elaborate story. I feel like when I haven't seen the first episode, but from what I can tell is that they each have a story already when you start the show. And I was wondering, where does that leave them in the opening of the series? How do we find out about them? How do you present them to the audience?
Well, the pilot starts with all these guys graduating from college,
right,
and then we rapidly find them a year later, when all their dreams have not come true, and they're all stuck in various ways in a holding pattern. And then in various ways, each of them kind of makes an essential mistake about how to deal with that. Whether it's Lou going to work for his dad, who he has a very bad relationship with, or Daphne, allowing a romance to start with her boss at work when she's trying to get paid for her internship, which puts her in a lot of complexity. So one by one, they all sort of make little mistakes that start them down a path that will take about 12 episodes to figure out.
And I'm curious, speaking of 12 episodes, you have 5 characters. Do you have some episodes that focus more on one or the other, or are they pretty well even split?
I'd say every episode has a fully formed story for every character. Sometimes there's a little bit less for somebody, but in general, every episode is everybody gets an arc. So if anybody's watching the show and they love that character, they're always going to get a story that week.
Yeah, that's good. And can you talk about sort of the theme for the first season, the overall arc of where we start and when we end up? What was your driving force?
I'd say when I was working with the writers, we talked a lot about life. We said that that the purpose of life is to love, and that people don't. But you look around the world; it's not full of love, right? And so you wonder why. We decided the problem is fear. People are afraid. So then we realized, what do people do? They're afraid. So then I think, what can I do to not be afraid so I can love and live my life? They think, I will get money. I'll make some money. And then once I have enough money, then I won't be afraid anymore. But it's not real. It doesn't work. It's never enough. So you ultimately learn that what you want is not money. You want purpose. You want a sense of purpose. And that gives you the freedom. And so I'd say the general theme of the season is, that everyone's learning those lessons every day. And at the end of the day, they all still have their friends. They have each other. And so the struggle to try to get purpose instead of money and keep your integrity, is the journey for all of them as individuals. But the theme of the show at the end of the day is that the most important thing in life is your friends.
I really love what you're talking about in terms of it feels you have a very interesting approach and characters, and I think I enjoy that in terms of creating drama. I think that's very important. And I'm sort of wondering what the writing process is like for you. Do you start off knowing exactly where you want your characters to end up by the end of the season, or do you kind of play off ideas as you move along?
It's a little of both. You aim for something in the distance, and at some point you either realize we're going to get there or we're never going to get there, and then you start changing it. Because the actors also inform the process immensely. It's a very collaborative show. All of the actors were always, coming to the writers with saying, like, this doesn't seem right, this doesn't seem right, can we do this instead, can we do that instead? And not just about lines, but about entire, movements of story. And in every case, it was always very helpful. So it's a journey. You just know there's a couple things you probably won't ever do,
right.
And you just don't do those things.
Were you surprised at where it ended up?
Yeah, in some cases, very much so.
And can you talk about the most surprising part of being part of Underemployed for that first season?
The most surprising part? The most surprising part of Underemployed in this first season for me was how much people seem to be relating to the material. It's like, to me, it was a private story I wanted to tell. But from the moment the show began to be talked about in the press, everyone's been just saying, like, that's my life, that's my life, that's my life. And that's been a really fun surprise, but it's been a surprise.
And have you ever been underemployed?
Oh, I've been terrifically underemployed in my life. I've had terrible jobs. I worked trimming the fat off turkey thighs at a turkey processing plant. I worked at a skeet shooting range with people shooting shotguns over my head while I put clay pigeons on a spring-loaded machine. I worked for 3 years at a fish store selling fish. I've done a lot of crazy jobs. Also done a lot of interesting jobs too.
And I have 2 more questions for you. Can you tease a little more about some of the storylines that we can expect in the first season?
Yeah, well, Daphne is working at the ad agency, and she's definitely going to find herself caught in a love triangle between her boss, Todd, and one of the other characters on the show. I can't say which. Sophia, in the pilot, is a virgin, and she's going to get over that in the pilot, and then go through the struggle of dealing with coming out to her parents as a lesbian, and that's going to have some real ups and downs and some real ramifications for her life. And Raviva is going to struggle to balance being a stay-at-home mom with her musicianship. She's a songwriter, and that's a really great thing to watch her grow in that and go out and try to get a record deal, and while always carrying a baby with her all the time. And Lou is going to go work for his dad and get into some unexpected trouble with a coworker.
Interesting. And so my final question is, if people could only know one thing about Underemployed before they start watching, what would you like that to be?
That it's on their side. The show is on the side of the viewer. That we're trying to make a show for people to give them something to take away. That it makes life a little better and a little easier and a little more understandable. That hopefully it's not a product for consumption. It is, hopefully to some small degree, a gift.